we're supposed to be doing at the moment. This is gathering time. But there's a warm-up question in the study that I'm going to get you to do while you're gathering. On the screen is 2 questions. You can talk about whatever you like with the person you're talking about, but if you've got nothing to talk about, answer one of the questions. For those of you who just arrived, we're in mingling mode. Please eat some of my donuts. There's lots of them. But here's the second lot of questions. If you're still talking to the same person, maybe it's time to talk to a different person. And choose one of the questions and see if you want to answer it. Here's the third lot of questions. If you still want to do your connecting and mingling, I really like the second one of these questions. grab another donut, come and find a seat at any table. Kevin may give you a sheet of paper as you walk past. That's the study part of the night. But grab a seat at any table. You've got about 3 minutes to do it, so don't get too stressed. Well, welcome to those people who are in the building, and for this centre part of tonight, we're actually welcoming at least 6 people who are watching. Maybe 2 of us are in the building as well. But there are some people who are watching online. Welcome to you as well. Tonight's got 2 different parts to it. There's a large group section, which we're going to do now. And then there will be splitting into some smaller groups where I may just mix us up just a little bit more, unless we're happy with where we're at, to get a bit more in-depth in some of our Bible passages. But I want to thank you for tonight. I'm really excited about the possibilities and the potential of learning together. This fits into a larger narrative of what Kevin and I are trying to do during Lent, which includes the sermons and the Bible studies and, really leading up to the Easter services as well. And so if you haven't seen last Sunday's sermon yet, it might be worthwhile to check it out on the web page or on our YouTube channel later. But to catch you up, in case you have forgotten, sound is not on properly. Thanks, Lara. I don't quite know why the sound's not on properly. Kevin's sort of working it out. Can you actually hear it, Lara? Because that doesn't say it's not on. It's just not on properly. I'll just keep going for the moment, and then I will check what that means. I can hear myself, so I'll keep going, and then we'll see what it means when we hit to the verse video. To catch you up, I'm going to give you a 2-minute recap of my sermon. And I know that sometimes people say, if you can do a 2-minute recap of a sermon, why did you take 25 minutes to do it on Sunday? We'll debate that later. So we talked about how Lent, traditionally, people for millenniums have been using 3 spiritual practices to enhance their Lent journey, which have been prayer, fasting, and alms giving. That's alms with an L, not with an R, just to clarify. And so we looked at those on Sunday. We made some challenges to pray more together, to sit in the presence of God and just listen, and to maybe even do some prayer walks as we move through Lent. We also talked about almsgiving. I have fixed that slide now. And we had the challenge of maybe seeing how we can be giving to those in need. The world's all over the place at the moment. There are so many areas of need. That should not be hard for us to be able to share some of our blessings with those in need. But I spend most of my time talking about fasting. This idea of not necessarily giving up food, but rather in the spirit of Isaiah 58, this idea of the fasting that God requires is to remove the chains of oppression and the yoke of injustice, to let the oppressed go free, to share your food with the hungry, open your homes to the homeless, give your clothes to the people who've got nothing to wear, and do not refuse to help either your own relatives, or another way of understanding the Hebrew is the people who are close to you, the people who are around you. And so we're sort of going to go a bit deeper into that tonight. That was my 3-minute summary. I finished off, I used this quote, but I put that in the Facebook group for today, for the other day, just saying that as Easter people, we should be following Jesus' example of this, to be trying to make a difference and improve the world that we are in. And I sort of explained how we're going to split this up over the 6 weeks of Lent, and in particular looking at material poverty, moral poverty, and spiritual poverty. So material poverty is how do we address the injustice of people not having enough, not having what they need to live. Moral poverty, how do we address the poor decisions that sometimes are made, which then goes on to affect other people. And the spiritual poverty, how do we help everyone discover the riches that we can find in Jesus, and particularly in the lead up to Easter, the story of Easter. So we're all caught up with that? So we're going to go a bit deeper into this, but tonight I want to look at this idea of material poverty. And before we jump into that, I'm going to just take a step backwards and look at the issue of justice. And I'm going to show you a 7-minute video from the people from the Bible Project. I know that the young people have seen a lot of the Bible projects. I think they're fantastic as a team. And this is their trying to work out what does it mean for us to have an understanding of biblical justice. Biblical justice. I'm just going to flip it over for the people online to get the full screen. It's going to work. Yes, here it is.
If you were a praying mantis, it would be socially acceptable to devour your mate.
And if you're a honey badger, you have no regard for other animals. You don't care.
If you're a panda with twins, it's normal to abandon one to take care of the other.
But if humans do any of these things, we would call it wrong, unfair, or unjust.
Yeah, why is that? Why do humans care so much about justice?
Well, the Bible has a fascinating response to that question. On page 1, humans are set apart from all other creatures as the image of God.
Yeah, God's representatives who rule the world by his definition of good and evil.
And this identity, it's the bedrock of the Bible's view of justice. All humans are equal before God and have the right to be treated with dignity and fairness no matter who you are.
And that would be nice if we all did that. But we know how the world really works.
And the Bible addresses that too. It shows how we are constantly redefining good and evil to our own advantage at the expense of others.
Yeah, self-preservation. And the weaker someone is, the easier it is to take advantage of them.
And so in the biblical story, we see this happening on a personal level, but also in families, and then in communities, and in whole civilizations that create injustice, especially towards the vulnerable. But the story doesn't end there. Out of this whole mess, God chose a man named Abraham to start a new kind of family. Specifically, Abraham was to teach his family to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice.
Yeah, doing righteousness, that's a Bible word I don't really use, but what comes to mind is being a good person.
But what does that even mean, being good? The biblical Hebrew word for righteousness is tzedakah, and it's more specific. It's an ethical standard that refers to right relationships between people. It's about treating others as the image of God,
With the God-given dignity they deserve.
And this word justice, it's the Hebrew word mishpat. It can refer to retributive justice.
Like if I steal something, I'd pay the consequences.
Exactly. Yet most often in the Bible, mishpat refers to restorative justice. It means going a step further, actually seeking out vulnerable people who are being taken advantage of and helping them.
Yeah, some people call this charity.
But mishpat involves way more. It means taking steps to advocate for the vulnerable and changing social structures to prevent injustice.
So justice and righteousness are about a radical, selfless way of life.
Yeah, and you find this idea all over the Bible. Like here, in the book of Proverbs, what does it mean to bring about just righteousness?
Open your mouth for those who can't speak for themselves.
And what do these words mean for the prophets, like Jeremiah?
Rescue the disadvantaged, and don't tolerate oppression or violence against the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow.
And like here, look in the book of Psalms.
The Lord God upholds justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, and sets the prisoner free. But he thwarts the way of the wicked. Whoa, he thwarts the wicked?
Yeah, in Hebrew, the word wicked is rasha. It means guilty or in the wrong. It refers to someone who mistreats another human, ignoring their dignity as an image of God.
So justice and righteousness is a big deal to God.
Yes, it's what Abraham's family, the Israelites, were to be all about. They ended up as immigrant slaves being oppressed unjustly in Egypt. And so God confronted Egypt's evil, declaring them to be rasha, guilty of injustice. And so he rescued Israel. But the tragic irony of the Old Testament story is that these redeemed people went on to commit the same acts of injustice against the vulnerable. And so God sent prophets who declared Israel guilty.
But they weren't the only ones. There's injustice everywhere.
Yeah, some people actively perpetrate injustice. Others receive benefits or privileges from unjust social structures they take for granted. And sadly, history has shown that when the oppressed gain power, they often become oppressors themselves.
So we all participate in injustice, actively or passively, even unintentionally. We're all the guilty ones.
And so this is the surprising message of the biblical story. God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us a gift, the life of Jesus. He did righteousness and justice, and yet He died on behalf of the guilty. But then God declared Jesus to be the righteous one when he rose from the dead. And so now Jesus offers his life to the guilty so that they too can be declared righteous before God, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did for them.
The earliest followers of Jesus experienced this righteousness from God, not just as a new status, but as a power that changed their lives and compelled them to act in surprising new ways.
Yeah, if God declared someone righteous when they didn't deserve it, the only reasonable response is to go and seek righteousness and justice for others.
This is a radical way of life, and it's not always convenient or easy. It's courageously making other people's problems my problems.
This is what Jesus meant by loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about a lifetime commitment fueled by the words of the ancient prophet Micah. God has told you, humans, what is good, and what the Lord requires of you is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
Hey, this is John and Tim from the Bible Project. Thanks for watching this video. This was a theme video where we take one biblical motif and trace it from beginning to end. We also do a lot of other videos you can find here on our YouTube channel.
The Bible Project is a non-profit animation studio, and we're crowd-funded, which means you can help us make the next videos. You can find more information at our website, thebibleproject.com.
I thought I should leave that and be on because they do great work, and if they're wanting us to support them, I thought that was a good idea to leave that on. I just want us to have a quick, broad discussion. Is there anything that jumped out of you on that? Maybe we can just quickly start on the tables that we're at, and then I'll bring it into a big discussion in the group. Those people at home can be using the comment section and I'll talk to you. But if you're not quite sure and will remember what was in the study, in that little handout that you would have got, there's a quick summary of some of the points that I thought were good. You might think other points were good in there. Is there anything that jumps out at you out of that video about a biblical understanding of justice? Give you just a minute or two just to talk around your tables. For the people who are watching online, if you're wondering where to get this sheet from, you can go to the website, go to the thing that says Lent Study, and there's a link at the very top of it that you could download this actual sheet, or that page itself is a copy of this sheet. You can just look on the page itself and just follow the links through to study number 1. I'm going to bring you back in about 30 seconds. So I'm just going to wander around with this microphone and allow anybody to give their... Is there an insight from a particular table that you thought, yeah, that's a really good point from the video? I'm giving you a mic so that the people at home can hear you, not so that we can hear you. Does anybody want to give an insight? No? Anyone? Yes. Yes, Wayne's up.
I just thought the concept that everyone was at the same level and then lots of boxes were falling down. So the people that were at the same level and didn't fall down suddenly were above everyone else. And then at the end of the video, there were people at a level trying to pull people back up to their level.
Any other insights? Once again, this is just for the people at home.
I'm stealing this from our table, but the fact that the oppressed often become the oppressor.
Yes, I found that one quite confronting because you can see it happen so often. Yes.
Just the reminder that God's not just about retributive justice, he's about restorative justice, and lots of the people we meet might assume that God's about that other one, but we can help people, we can be part of restorative justice.
Yes, I've actually got that on a slide because I thought that was the powerful point of the video, just helping us to see the difference between retributive and restorative justice. And how, the video made the point, a lot of the Bible is actually about restorative justice, dealing with the issues behind the injustice to make things more level. Yeah. Any other comments? There was 4 Bible passages that were in the reading. I'm just wondering if we wanted just to remind ourselves of that. They're on the screen, but you can look them up, or if you're using your phone, you can actually click on the thing and it comes up. But is there 4 volunteers to read out a Bible reading for us using the microphone? I better take around the clicker, otherwise I can't move on. Was that you, David, putting up your hand? I thought it was. Yes.
So it's Jeremiah 22:3. This is what the Lord says. Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the fatherless or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place.
I'm going to keep passing it around, but if any Bible passage jumps out at you and you go, actually, I want to make a comment about that, give me an extra big wave and we'll let you do that. Rob was next and you want to make a comment, or you... The next one, or this one? Oh no, Micah's the 4th one. I'll let you read that one. Proverbs is the next one, and Rob had his hand up.
Okay, Proverbs 31:8-9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy.
We're actually going to be talking about more the second study, but how do we help those without a voice have a voice, and how can we make sure that when we do that, we're not just giving them our voice and our own thoughts, but actually taking the time to hear their voice. That's a really challenging Bible passage, that one. Psalm 146. There's a wave over here.
He upholds the cause of the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. The Lord sets prisoners free. The Lord gives sight to the blind. The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down. The Lord loves the righteous. Keep going. The Lord watches over the foreigner and sustains the fatherless and the widow, but he frustrates the way of the wicked.
And the last one over to Bill.
So this is a very well-known one from Micah. So screen. I've got the 6. Yeah, but the screen's behind me, all right? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And I just wanted to say that's one of my favourite verses and something I think about a lot. I tried to let it guide as much as possible how I actually act as a Christian.
Thank you. I just thought it was good to remind us of that because it sort of skipped over the Bible passages quite quickly in the video, and I thought they were all really good. I'm just fixing up my camera shots for the people. That's the one I need. Yep. And so for the next little bit, I just wanted to... I've got one more question, sorry, from that video. This idea of how do you respond to the ending part of that video where they sort of summed up the gospel message with a justice theme. I don't know if you've had that perspective before, that idea that God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us the gift of grace, that we are made righteous, not through any right of our own, but in response to that, we are to go and seek righteousness and justice for others. And I had the question there, is that a helpful reframing? Is that a positive reframing of that Easter gospel message just in terms of justice? You want to make a comment? Yeah, I'll run down.
I think it's helpful because often when we talk about injustice in society, there's a lot of anger, but in this reframing, God's love comes through. And when we, as Christians, should work for or work for against injustice, we should do it with God's grace and love, not through our sort of mortal anger.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah. For the next few minutes, I just want to give us a little bit of context that Kevin and I were talking about when we were putting this together, and then we'll watch 2 more videos and split into a small group. But to begin with, when we were talking about this, we wanted it to focus a little bit on the idea of material poverty. You know, this injustice that there are people in the world who literally do not have enough to live. And one of the things that Kevin raised was he mentioned the Millennium Development Goals. Do you know what they are? They were done in 1990, so they're a bit old now, hoping that in 25 years we would have solved these big 8 problems as a world. We're now past the 25 years because that finished in 2015, so that's 7 years ago. But I still think they're a helpful picture of what we're talking about here, because it isn't just about people not having enough money. It's a whole lot of other things as well. And so I just thought, actually Kevin thought, I'm doing it, but we thought that it would be good just to remind ourselves of these 8 Millennium Goals, what they were and how we went with them, and whether or not we still need to do work on any of them, which the answer, if you want to know up front, is yes, we do. So the first one was to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. In 1990, there was 1.4 billion people living in extreme poverty, which they said was less than $1.25, earning less than $1.25 a day. So there was 1.4 billion. Now it's only 830 million. Only. Yes, Sue? Yes. Well, that 830 million is it recent statistics. I don't know what it was 2 years ago, so I'm not denying it. Possibly it went down and back up again after COVID, but they're just saying it's one of the areas that we've actually been working hard in over those 25 years and did okay. But it's sad to go. Only 830 million people are still living on less than $1.25 a day. That's one of the things we're talking about. The next thing was to achieve universal primary education. This is possibly the best one that they were able to do, because only 57 million primary school age children have not attended any school. Only 57 million. But they actually did do rather well in that over the 25 years and brought that down. But can you hear what I'm saying? These figures are still terrible, and yet that was one of the best improved areas. The third one, promote gender equality and empower women. Yes, there has been some advantages there, and yet women still, on average, earn a third less than men and only hold 18% of parliamentary seats worldwide. 18%. It was 4% in 1990. So there's improvements, but you still look at it and go, we've got so much more to do here in some of these areas. Reduced child mortality, once again, has been good improvements, but a child born in a developing country is still 13 times more likely to die in the first 5 years than a child born in a developed country. That just doesn't seem right or fair. That's mainly due to malnutrition, is the main cause of that. Improved maternal health. In 1990, 500,000 women were dying of complications related to pregnancy and childbirth, of which 99% of those are in developing countries. They believe it's now halved. That figure has been halved, which is extraordinary, but still way too many. The third one was combat HIV, AIDS, malaria and other diseases. This is another one of the areas that have been huge improvements, mainly due to some very big donations by billionaires who have really helped in this area and made a big difference. But all the comments I was reading today saying, yeah, but COVID is another issue now. You know, the inequality of who has got access to vaccines and who doesn't is huge at the moment. So we may have solved a lot of the the HIV inequalities. HSC. Oh yeah, we need to solve that one too. But yeah, there's a lot of problems with COVID inequality at the moment. Ensures environmental sustainability. That not only covers stuff like biodiversity loss and climate change, but it also covers clean water and sanitation. And the clean water and sanitation has been a huge improvement over those 25 years. 76% of the world had access to drinking water in 1990, and 91% have now. So that's huge, but like every other key indicator in that thing is terrible, especially, you know, how we're dealing with the biodiversity loss was just gone backwards. And the last one, to develop a global partnership for development. There was a whole bunch of stuff about governments working together, including a commitment to give 0.7% of the national income. That started off well. It's gone to pieces now. You know, we just wanted to share this to highlight not only the enormity of the issue we're talking about tonight, but to also give us some hope that some things have been being addressed, but also to say this issue is bigger than just what we might have a narrow understanding of what poverty is. This actually covers a whole lot of stuff. And a really interesting line that I read said that this injustice needs to be addressed because not dealing with this leads to other problems. You know, the indignity of individuals not having enough leads them to other injustices such as discrimination, unjust labour practices and abuse. And so, you know, it's not just the fact that they don't have enough, It's because they don't have enough leads to a whole bunch of other problems that people who do have enough don't have. Is that a comment, or are you just moving? That's all right. I quoted Pope John Paul in my sermon on Sunday. I'll give you another quote for him. He actually speaks a lot about this issue. That's why I can keep quoting him. He says this: "More often, however, our contentment with our own circumstances can lead us in the path of indifference to the suffering and injustice experience of others." He says, "As long as I'm relatively healthy and comfortable, I don't have to think about those well off. Today, this selfish attitude of indifference has taken on a global proportions to the extent that we can speak of globalization of indifference. This is a problem which we as Christians need to confront." Does that sort of ring true for people? That sometimes when we become indifferent to the have-nots. You can debate that in a moment when I put you in your small groups. The Cardinal Oscar Romero, Kevin quoted him in his sermon the other week. I found a quote from him on this topic. He said, "For a lot of people, the issue of the poor is a bit like watching a house on fire. If you see a house on fire, you have some concern for the welfare of the people who own it. Are they still in? Are they okay? But how would you react if you found out that was your family's home and that your mother and sister were still inside?" He says your attitude would change completely and you'd do anything to rescue them, even the cost of getting hurt. His challenge was, how do we move from being concerned to being motivated to do something about it? He said, as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we need to be seeing Jesus in the people of the poor. The Bible says a lot about the poor and about helping the poor. A lot. I have a quote in my head that says that the Bible talks more about the poor than about moralistic issues. I couldn't actually find something to back up that. I Googled it all, for about 20 minutes trying to find a quote. But let me just say, there is a lot about the poor. And we're just going to watch another video now to put that in a larger context. This is a video by Common Grace, and it's just trying to show that Jesus' ministry was both spiritual, obviously, but also extremely practical, and the way that Jesus didn't necessarily want to separate the two. So here, I forget the person, her name's on the screen when we get to it, is speaking about this from Common Grace.
The I am statements in the Gospel of John are a great way for us to reflect on who Jesus is and what matters to him, and for us to prayerfully prepare for the upcoming Easter. This week we're starting with John chapter 6, where Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." There's a real temptation for us to reduce the language of this statement to solely spiritual connotations, when in fact the chapter is entirely about materiality, our flesh and blood and the earth beneath our feet. The chapter begins with this great miracle, often referred to as the feeding of the 5,000, where Jesus as host feeds the multitudes with only 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 fish. And after the miracle, after feeding all these people, the crowds gather to ask Jesus the following day who he is and why he has come. And he responds to them with this statement, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." It's a statement that tells us a lot about Jesus' mission in the world, and also the calling of those who will follow after him. And while there are lots of interesting, helpful ways for us to interpret this passage, I want to linger just for a moment on the themes of liberation that run throughout the chapter. Consider the context. In an age of empire, the colonizers' rule was not far from the mind of John, who opens the chapter by reminding us the name the colonizers had given to this lake in Galilee, also known as the Sea of Tiberias, he writes. And among those gathered there to encounter Jesus that day were some who were weak, hungry, religiously excluded, many unable to afford to participate in the Passover meal that Jesus refers to in the text. It's in this context that Jesus provides the bread that will and does fill their bodies. And after he has fed them all, he makes sure to gather up all the food, lest any be wasted or the earth on which they gathered be left disturbed. This is the bread of life, the bread of liberation. Against a backdrop of colonial conquest, with the hungry and the excluded, in a landscape always vulnerable to human practices, the bread of life announces, hosts, and delivers liberation. It's a fleshly liberation of the earth that's firmly grounded in the here and now that John's Gospel emphasises again and again and again. A liberation not set solely in the future or some eternity, but one that happens in our flesh and bones here this day. John is very careful to make no sharp distinction between physical hunger or spiritual hunger, as if the latter was somehow separated from our physical needs. Instead, all hunger is satisfied through the ministry of the same bread, the bread of life. In the middle of this discourse, Jesus tells the crowd that this is the work of God, that you believe in or believe into Jesus the Liberator. It's a performative act that asks us to come follow into the same work. A call to belief into this Jesus, the bread of life, the bread of liberation. And the crowd looks back to Jesus and responds, just as we're invited to today, by saying, "Sir, give us this bread always."
I want to say her name was Sharon Prentice, but I'm not confident on that. So I'll have to... Sorry? It's not Brooke. Oh, it's Brooke Prentice. No, I'm pretty sure her first name's Sharon, but I can't remember her last name. You know, it is Brooke Prentice, is from Common Grace as well. I apologise for that. I should have written it down. Interesting video, isn't it? I really like how she was linking those two things together, that concept of the spiritual hunger and the physical hunger, that for Jesus was one and the same. His ministry was about both. That doing one meant doing the other. And I think that that's a powerful image for us as well, especially when it comes to pondering our response to this. I'm going to show you the process from here, and for the people watching at home, I'll tell you when you're going to drop out, because we're just about to move into small groups, so it won't really work online. And so we're going to watch one more video from a bloke called Trevor. He is, I'm pretty sure, in the accounting office of TIA, because he's a little dry, but in the midst of his... Oh, sorry if there's any accountants around. I didn't mean that. Wait till you see his office. But he makes an extraordinarily good point. That's why I'm showing you the video. It's actually really good. And after that, I'm going to split you into small groups. You can either stay in the same group, you can mix it up. If you're bored with the people on your table, just move to another table. And then for about the next 15 to 20 minutes, there are some questions to do with diving deep into the Bible. In these things, there's some Bible passages to look up about the Old Testament response or protections of the poor, some New Testament references, just to have a read through that and to ponder what the Bible is saying about this. I'll give you about 15 to 20 minutes. If you finish that before I call you back, flip over, and the very bottom of the last page is a very broad question that says, how do we even begin to respond to something like this? It's a really difficult question, not one that you can answer in 15 to 20 minutes, but if you run out of things to say, that one you've probably got a lot of things to say about, and you can flip over to that. In about 15 to 20 minutes' time, I'll drop you off, the people who are watching at home, after the video from Trevor. You can do the last bit yourself, but I'm going to then show you a video called, I'm going to bring you back and show you a video called praying from a different place. I'm going to show you a 1-minute video to bring you back, so if you start to see a whole bunch of kids quoting Bible verses about the poor, you know you've got 1 minute left. And then I'm going to show you a video about praying from a different place. For the people at home, if you'd like to see that video, it is on our webpage. You can watch it there. It's an extraordinary video that will help us as a small group lead into a final time of prayer, and that's when the night will finish. So does that sort of make sense? So I thank you for the people who have been watching on at home. There's still a number of you there. Thank you for joining with us. We're going to finish with you guys after the video from Trevor. After we do that, you guys can either stay where you are or get up, move around, find a spot and have some discussion.
Her name is Dr.
Janice?
Dr. Janice
I was way off. Dr. Janice makes something or other. McRandall. There we go. Thank you for that. I should have written it down. I've written everything else down, but I did not write her name down, so once again, apologise for that. Let's hear from Trevor from Tier. It's definitely Trevor. His name's on the thing.
We're going to watch a clip with Deborah Story. Deborah works as a veterinarian at the RSPCA. She studies and teaches Bible studies
This
and
is not the right
aid
video.
and development.
That's the video that's going to bring you back. Hopefully this is Trevor. This is
We're
Trevor.
going to watch a clip with Deborah Story. Deborah works as a veterinarian at the RSPCA. She studies and teaches Bible studies and aid and development.
I'm going to have to move
She also
over
evaluates community development projects.
the thing and start the video myself because I haven't loaded it up. So I'm going to say, just talk amongst yourself for a minute, discuss any of those previous videos. Trevor will come on in a moment.
We're going to hear now from Trevor Thomas, who's the chair of the Tier Australia board. He's also the general manager of Invest, an ethical investment company based in Sydney. Here's what Trevor says.
God creates an economy in the Old Testament. It's a fantastic experiment. God sets up a people who are to be his people, to be marked by his values, his concerns. And the basic fundamental precepts of that economy are justice. And so God builds into the system all sorts of checks and balances so that when his people take control of the land and divide it up, it's divided equally between families. There's opportunity. It's a rich land flowing with milk and honey, so people can go and prosper. If they're successful on their farms, they can accumulate wealth. And yet, always behind that is the idea that the wealth is the Lord's and the land is the Lord's. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, says Psalm 24. You take that through to the New Testament and you find Jesus coming into a poor agrarian society where most people are day labourers or work the land at a subsistence level, and he warns them about the dangers of wealth. It's the most bizarre thing that in this poor context, where we would see life from our perspective as being incredibly impoverished, Jesus is warning people about the dangers of wealth and about the need to be generous and open-hearted and open-handed. And where he encounters people who are wealthy and powerful, he repeatedly challenges them, not just to have the right attitude, but to express the right attitude in their actions. A characteristic of those who are the community of grace, we who've received grace, are to be people of generosity in everything that we have. A real challenge for us is we live in a comfortable age, and we can become numbed to the suffering of people who are outside our normal perspective. And Jesus calls us to live different lives, and to not fall in the trap of becoming greedy and self-serving. And the only way that we can do that is actually by taking an active stance against greed, because it's a creeping enemy. The risk is that we start using language where we say we want the best for ourselves, or we want the best for our children. And before long we can find that our lifestyles are just like that of those of our neighbours. And really the only way in which we can counteract that power is to have an offensive weapon, which is generosity. We actually have to break the power of greed by giving things away. The Apostle Paul, writing to Timothy, says the same thing. Command those who are rich in this world to be rich in good deeds, generous, willing to share. We in Australia need to hear those words reverberating in our ears every day. But it's more than that. It's generosity and justice, because there's a just claim that all people who live on earth have on the resources that God put into our hands. The earth is the Lord's. It's not ours to exploit, it's the Lord's. And if our economic system ends up exploiting other people or exploiting the planet in unsustainable ways, then I'd say that we're actually dishonouring God, and that our economic system is immoral and we need to repent and remake our systems around more the values of justice and generosity. So, and I think it's very clear that our economic system actually is very exploitative of other people, and it is very exploitative of the planet. And so we need to look at ways in which we can be agents of change, and we can represent kingdom values in the way that we are.